Discover the surprising truth. An amazing journey where a woman stole his soul to save her life. Hannah felt the weight of the world as she wiped down the old wooden tables at the Maplewood diner, her thoughts tracing paths she couldn't quite reach. Each swirl of her rag echoed the dream she once had, aspirations lost amidst the greasy platters and the click of coffee mugs. She was 35 and a single mother, navigating life's relentless currents while carrying her elderly mother, Margaret's fading legacy on her back. It pained her to drown in her mother's once vibrant artistry, now muddied by Alzheimer's. As she poured endless cups of coffee, she couldn't shake the nagging sensation that her spirit was slipping away, overshadowed by her mother's glory days. On occasion, she dared to wonder when her own dreams fell into shadows, snuffed out like the flicker of a candle left unattended. They once danced, bright and free, yet now her life was a collage of waitressing shifts followed by stocking shelves at the grocery store. One decision after another, she was pulled deeper into suffocating routines. The passion she thought had lingered in the recesses of her heart felt like a distant echo that faded with every shift change, and guilt seeped in. Was it disloyalty to want more? Before lunch rushes, thoughts of her neglected interest bubbled to the surface. What about painting? She had a canvas in the attic coated with dust, a remnant of who she used to be. But the guilt was paralyzing. How could she honor her mother, whose vibrant hues were only memories now? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Hannah's heart raced at the thought of betraying her mother's legacy. Could she reclaim her artistic self without tarnishing the woman who had paved her path? The conversations she'd overheard in whispers at the diner about artists struggling and succumbing to exploitation haunted her. What if she was just another name on a list, someone easy to overlook? The passion she felt, suffocated by duty, began to erupt like a concealed volcano. Tom, a medical researcher new to town, disrupted her routine one drizzly afternoon. His own fatigue mirrored hers, and their conversations turned into tiny epiphanies, snippets of hope amid their shared despair. With every moment spent at art therapy classes, her heart fluttered like new beginnings. But as they uncovered the insidious art fraud, the urge to take action warred with the risk of losing everything, her mother's dignity, her own new spark. Hannah stood there, paintbrush trembling in hand, her heart caught between the clarity of her newfound purpose and the grating fear of her mother's memory being sullied. What if standing up for the truth meant pulling her family apart? What if this was the moment where every ounce of hope crumbled? Each brushstroke blazed with urgency, yet shadows loomed larger. For every revelation there was a question, every laugh shared with Tom growing heavier with consequence. The choices ahead spun her mind into turmoil. The answer to whether she could ascend from her mother's shadow wrapped tightly around her chest. Would she break free, or would she remain ensnared under the legacy she fought to protect, left standing at the precipice of a decision that felt more daunting than any life she'd lived before? As the paint glided across the canvas, Hannah felt electricity coursing through her veins, but it was the discord in her mind that kept her from fully embracing the moment. Each brushstroke stirred a growing tension, a mingling of exhilaration and dread. Should she continue? The voice of her mother swirled in her thoughts, a gentle reminder tinged with worry. What would Margaret think of this bold act of self-expression? Would she champion it or condemn it as an act of selfishness? Hannah set the brush down, her heart hammering against her ribcage. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, summoning the memories of moments spent in the sunlit haze of her mother's studio. Each painting was an extension of Margaret's soul, the colors vibrant and alive, each canvas echoing with laughter and love. But now, those hues felt like a burden. Would her attempt to create something new, something her own, be an act of love or betrayal? The image of Tom, with his thoughtful gaze and thrilled encouragement for her artwork, flashed before her. He had seen her potential before she ever had, urging her to let go of the self-imposed chains binding her spirit. Yet tied to his belief in her was the anxiety of judgment, both from herself and from a community that thrived on doubt. Stepping into the light could expose her, make her vulnerable, and the thought was paralyzing. Days passed like a blur of grease stains and clanging dishes as she sank back into the rhythm of her job. The diner felt heavier now, as if the air around her was thicker with what-ifs. The laughter of customers and the hum of conversation became a soundtrack that only deepened her inner turmoil. In the fleeting moments between orders, she daydreamed about the art therapy sessions, the feel of the paint under her fingers, the connection she had begun to forge with like-minded souls who understood the depths of creative struggle. One evening, after a brutal shift, she found herself in front of the attic door, a door she hadn't dared to open in years. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the knob, a tide of conflicting emotions rising within her. What if she encountered the remnants of her youthful dreams scattered in half-forgotten canvases? What awaited her on the other side was more than a mere accumulation of dust. It was a gateway to the woman she had buried beneath the weight of guilt and obligation. In a moment of resolve, she swung open the door and ascended the stairs. The attic was dimly lit, the air stale with memories. Dust motes danced in the soft, filtered light. As she rummaged through long-forgotten boxes, she unearthed crumpled sketches and paint tubes that had long since dried up. Each item felt more like a relic than a piece of her past. But amid the detritus, a specific canvas caught her eye, a painting of a vibrant sunset, emboldened by her youthful optimism. Tears pricked her eyes as she recognized not only the colors but the passion that had driven her to create. It was as if the canvas was speaking, urging her to reclaim her artistic identity. She carried it down the stairs, setting it gently on her workstation, a declaration of intention. But with it came a revelation. To honor her mother's legacy might also mean redefining it. The thought ignited a flicker of possibility and solidified a knot of determination deep within her. It was time to confront the vulnerability she had been sheltering. She could honor her mother's artistry while forging her own path. Deepening hues of resolve filled her heart, and Hannah felt her spirit rise like the colors on her palette. But the deeper she delved into this new journey, the more treacherous the waters became. With the realization of her potential came the risk of familial confrontation. How would Margaret react when the daughter she had nurtured began to erase the outline of her own identity to paint anew? The fear loomed large, yet the urgency within her surged, demanding action. As she stood before the canvas, still untouched by her brush, questions loomed larger than the doubts. Could this leap into the unknown lead to a personal renaissance? Or would it shatter the fragile bond she shared with her mother? The moment hung heavy in the air, both exhilarating and terrifying, and as the weight of her resolve matures, Hannah knew she was teetering on the edge of transformation. The choice was hers to embrace. It filled her with an adrenaline she had missed for far too long. Just as the paint lifted from the brush, so too was the burden lifted from her soul. But would she summon the courage to paint over the shadows with bold strokes of her own? And just as Hannah turned towards her canvas, a sudden knock at the door startled her. The world outside intruded, reminding her that the moment of truth was approaching. Was she ready to face what lay ahead, or would she retreat into the comfort of her past? With a steady yet rapid pulse echoing in her ears, Hannah froze at the sound of the knock. The familiar clang of metal against wood felt like a thunderclap in her moment of calm deliberation. Instinctively, she stepped back from the workspace, her heart racing as her mind whirred with possibilities. Who could it be at this hour? The cautious tones of apprehension dragged at the edges of her resolve. Taking a moment to gather herself, she approached the door. The paint-splattered floorboards creaked beneath her feet, mirroring her rising anxiety. She unlatched the door slowly, her breath hitching slightly as she pulled it open to reveal Tom, standing in the soft glow of the porch light, concern etched across his face. "Hannah," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "I was just checking on you. You seemed distant lately. Everything okay?" His presence was grounding, yet it stirred an unsettling mix of emotions within her. Tom was her supporter, the voice urging her toward unfathomable possibilities. But the truth of her current struggle felt too raw to share. She offered a faint smile, an attempt to mask the tempest of thoughts swirling in her mind. "I'm fine, just working on something. Mind if I come in? He asked, his eyes sweeping over the dimly lit room before locking onto hers. She hesitated, weighing the implications of allowing him to see the space where she had been wrestling with her identity. This was not just about art. It was a confrontation of her deepest fears. What if he saw the unfinished canvas as a symbol of her uncertainty? What if he questioned her commitment to the path she was tentatively stepping onto? Yet she remembered the warmth of his encouragement, and in that instant, she made a decision. "Sure," she finally replied, stepping aside to let him in. As Tom entered, she caught a glimpse of his genuine admiration for the scattered brushes and canvases leaned against the wall. "These are amazing," he remarked, moving deeper into her world, his fingers lingering on a dry brush and a palette stained with remnants of color. "I've been digging into some old stuff," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, echoing the uncertainty growing within her. "It looks like you're ready to create again," he said, turning to face her, his expression filled with optimism. The kindness in his voice wrapped around her like a warm blanket, but with it came a sharp prick of guilt. "Yeah, well, it's not that simple," she replied, her honesty spilling out before she could reel it back. "There's a lot of pressure to adhere to what's expected of me, and I'm terrified of disappointing my mom. What if this new direction feels like betrayal?" Tom paused, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. "Hannah, your mom's legacy is part of you, but that doesn't mean you don't get to carve out your own path. It doesn't mean she wouldn't understand." His unwavering belief in her stoked a small fire of defiance inside her, yet doubt still loomed large. How could she undertake such a monumental shift, not only in her art, but also in her relationship with her mother? The weight of the unpainted canvas loomed larger in the silence between them, echoing the very essence of her struggle. "I really want to. I do," she said, feeling a spark of truth ignite deep within her. "But what if I fail?" "Then you fail. At least you'll have tried," he said, his tone strong and resolute. "But you might discover something beautiful instead, something that's uniquely yours." The air shifted around them, laden with unspoken possibility. Hannah found herself considering the question he posed, that simple idea of trying. In that moment, she realized how much she wanted to live fully, rather than linger hesitantly in the shadows of her mother's achievements. She took a breath, letting the pulse of her ambition rise to the surface. "You might be right," she replied, her voice steadier now. "Maybe I need to take that risk. Maybe I need to make my own mark." As Tom smiled, encouraging her to step further into her own truth, she felt a surge of courage fill her from within. It wasn't just about painting anymore. It was about reclaiming her identity, her art, and ultimately her life. But just as the warmth of determination began to settle, a sense of foreboding flickered back to life, a reminder of the storm brewing just beyond the warmth of her newfound resolve. How would Margaret react when she revealed this journey to her? Would she be embraced or rejected? The door to her mother's expectations was looming, and confronting it felt inevitable. And as the evening drew on, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that she was teetering on the cusp of something monumental, and the hardest part was yet to come. At that moment, she knew a reckoning awaited her when they finally spoke, the pivotal moment destined to shape not only her artistic journey, but also the fragile ties of family loyalty. Would she dare to draw her own line in the sand? Or would she retreat once again into the shadows of doubt? Hannah lingered in the charged atmosphere that enveloped the room, the weight of Tom's encouragement molding her thoughts into a sturdy foundation of possibility. Yet, a turbulent undercurrent thrummed beneath her resolve. This confidence was fragile, teetering on the verge of doubt as she considered her looming conversation with her mother. A tight knot formed in her stomach as anxiety reigned. "Maybe we should start planning," Tom proposed, breaking the silence. His voice had a soothing timbre, a gentle reminder that they were in this together. "What do you think your first piece should represent?" The question caught Hannah off guard. While she had harbored a yearning to create, the thought of making something meaningful ignited both excitement and terror. She leaned against the wall, crossing her arms defensively as her mind raced through ideas she had buried. A clear vision eluded her, slipping through her fingers like fine sand. "I don't know, Tom. It's hard to put into words. I want to express something real, something authentic." She trailed off, feeling the weight of expectation bear down on her. "What about starting with how you feel?" Tom suggested, and stepped closer, eyes bright with optimism. "Your struggles, your hopes. Let's distill it down to the core of who you are." His suggestion echoed the unrefined thoughts swirling in her mind. Art should be cathartic, a vehicle for her emotional truths. The vision began to materialize. She could paint a piece that captured her internal conflict, but could she truly translate her tangled emotions to the canvas? Tom's expectant gaze intensified her self-doubt, and she found herself questioning whether she possessed the skill to convey her disarray without losing her mother's respect. "What if I mess up? What if I disappoint everyone?" she countered, her voice tightening with familiarity. The cycle of self-doubt was merciless, and she could feel it tightening around her throat. "You'll only disappoint yourself if you don't try," he replied, the firmness in his voice cutting through her despair. "What if this is the turning point you've been waiting for, the moment you take your legacy and make it your own?" The clarity of his statement struck her like a wave. This wasn't just about a piece of art. It was an act of rebellion against her own fears, an assertion of autonomy. The thought began to unfurl in her mind like a blooming flower, challenging her reservations while offering a glimpse of uncharted freedom. "Okay, maybe I could try," Hannah said, her pulse quickening at the idea. "But first, I need to talk to my mom. I can't go any further without her knowing what I'm planning." Tom's expression shifted to one of deep understanding. "You know her well enough to understand how she might react. Think about what she means to you, but also consider your own needs. It's a balancing act." She mulled over the notion, feeling the push and pull of her conflicting motivations, her desire for approval and her intense yearning for independence. Each letter of the words balancing act wove through her thoughts like whispers of a storm, sharpening her resolve to confront Margaret. But would her mother understand that to sustain their connection, Hannah needed to forge her own identity as an artist? A sense of calm descended as she recognized that confrontation could lead to liberation. She took a deep breath, feeling the fluidity of her thoughts begin to align. "You're right. There's no way forward without honesty," she declared, her voice a mixture of determination and trepidation. "I can't keep hiding behind this fear." Yet beneath her newfound resolve lay an undeniable tension, the looming uncertainty of her mother's reaction shadowing her optimism. Was she ready to face the possibility that her truth may not be accepted? Tom watched her intently, almost as if he could feel the shifting tides of her spirit. "Then it's settled. You'll talk to her, and after that, we'll start planning your first piece." As the night wore on and the hours slipped away, excitement and anxiety mingled within her, creating a heady mixture that set her heart racing. The only certainty was that she stood on the cusp of change, a precipice from which she might either soar or fall. Eventually, the night quieted, and they parted ways with an unspoken agreement that tomorrow would bring the reckoning she had feared for too long. But a spark of hope flickered on the horizon as she felt the stirring of her long-buried aspirations surging to the forefront. With a final glance in the mirror before bed, Hannah steadied herself. Tomorrow she would unveil her truth, confronting her fears head-on. But would the embrace of honesty bring her closer to her mother, or fracture their bond forever? The shadow of uncertainty loomed, and she drifted into sleep, pondering the answer that awaited her in the light of dawn. Morning light crept through the curtains, painting the room with a gentle warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold knot of anxiety in Hannah's stomach. Each ray felt like a reminder of the impending conversation, the moment that would either propel her forward or paralyze her in place. She rose early, her mind already racing through possible scenarios. Would her mother's face twist with disappointment? Or would she see the spark of passion that Hannah longed to share? The risks loomed large, taunting her with images of rejection and disapproval. It was almost enough to make her retreat to the safety of silence, but deep down, she knew that the time for silence had long passed. Her morning rituals felt different today. Every sip of coffee, every brush of her hair against her shoulder, seemed charged with a significance she had never before recognized. She paused to examine her reflection, searching for a semblance of the strength that Tom had seen in her. But all she found were the remnants of doubt etched around her eyes. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, clutching the edge of the sink. But doubt still lingered, whispering that perhaps she was about to step off a ledge, unprepared for the fall. Hannah decided to take a stroll before meeting her mother. Perhaps the fresh air and rhythm of her feet against the pavement could quiet her thoughts. She walked through her neighborhood, observing the familiar sights that had been backdrop to her childhood. Each house, each flower, seemed tainted with nostalgia, reminding her of the expectations that had been woven into her upbringing. As she passed a large oak tree, a flicker of inspiration hit her. She imagined an artwork capturing this blend of her past and her future, her roots intertwined with her aspirations. Art as a bridge, she thought, echoing Tom's earlier words. It became palpable, this desire to create something that would speak to the complexities of her identity. With renewed determination, she returned home. The moment she stepped through the door, she felt the weight of her mission intensify. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared breakfast, each crack of an egg and slice of bread acting as both a distraction and a countdown to confrontation. Margaret entered the kitchen, her expression open but cautious. "Good morning, sweetheart. You're up early," she remarked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Hannah felt the familiar pull of hesitation, but she pushed through, reminding herself that this conversation was necessary. "Mom, can we talk about something important?" Margaret paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" The air thickened with unspoken words as Hannah fought to find her voice. The kitchen felt both familiar and foreign, warmth engulfing her while tension crackled around them. "I've been thinking a lot about my art, about what it really means to me," she began, heart pounding. "I want to pursue it seriously, and I want you to know." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around the handle of her mug. "Art? You mean like painting, right? We've talked about this before, Hannah. Is that really what you want?" Each question felt like a barrier, yet they drove Hannah forward into the depth of her sentiments. "Yes, I want to create art that reflects who I am, not just what others expect from me," she asserted, finding a clearer thread in her speech. "But what about your job, your career path?" her mother pressed, concern lacing her voice. "What will people say?" Tension shot through Hannah as though the room had grown smaller. The question spiraled her back to the very doubt she had been battling. Approval still hung heavily in the air. "What if I were to say that what people think doesn't matter as much to me as expressing my truth?" she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, yet defiant. For a moment, silence enveloped the kitchen, heavy and thick. In that pause, Hannah searched her mother's face for any hint of understanding. Would her mother's expectations drown her ambition? Or would this vulnerability open the door to acceptance? The answer remained elusive, caught in the balance of love and judgment. Margaret inhaled deeply, her expression shifting to reveal thoughtfulness rather than dismissal. "This is a big step for you, Hannah. I just want you to be sure." Whether it was uncertainty or gradual acceptance, Hannah sensed a break in the storm. "I understand, Mom, and I hope to show you how important this is to me." As Margaret's gaze softened, an inkling of hope ignited within Hannah. Perhaps they could navigate this journey together rather than apart. But before Hannah could feel fully relieved, a new apprehension clawed at her heart. What if they couldn't reconcile the discrepancies between their visions for her life? What if this conversation did not mark liberation, but only the beginning of a deeper struggle? In this shared silence, Hannah knew this was merely the opening act of a broader narrative. She steeled herself, aware that the climax had yet to unfold and the real challenge lay ahead. The moment hung between them, a precarious balance of hope and fear. Margaret's cautious expression suggested that acceptance was not guaranteed. Hannah's pulse quickened. She felt exposed, her truths laid bare, yet the conversation felt like a mere pebble skipped across the surface of a deeper, more turbulent sea. "What if I fail?" The question echoed in her mind as she broke the silence to address the unspoken fear. "What if I pour everything into my art and it leads nowhere?" Hannah's own reflection of doubt overshadowed the flicker of hope she had felt just moments ago. Margaret seemed to sense her daughter's turmoil. "Failure is part of the process, Hannah, but you need to decide what truly matters to you." The maternal instinct to protect her daughter prevailed, yet there was something new in her voice, a hint of understanding. Taking a deep breath, Hannah fortified herself against the fear of failure. I need to try. I can't live for anyone else's dreams but my own. Each word felt like a declaration, an intention set into motion. She left the kitchen, her heart pounding not just from the gravity of their dialogue, but from the realization that this was just the beginning. What lay ahead would test her resolve. Deciding to face her fears head-on, Hannah grabbed her sketchbook and headed to the local art studio, a space she had been hesitant to enter for too long. The familiar sounds of brushes clinking against palettes and the soft chatter of creativity filled her senses. Each footstep inside the studio carried the weight of her decision, the very decision she once perceived as reckless. She spotted an empty easel in the corner, a blank canvas awaiting her imagination. This canvas represented infinite possibilities. It urged her forward, demanding action rather than hesitation. As she prepared to paint, Hannah wrestled with a familiar inner critic, the voice whispering that she was unworthy, unequipped, but she was no longer the woman who would shrink in the shadow of that voice. She squeezed a dollop of paint onto her palette, the vivid colors a stark contrast to the gray haze of doubt lingering in her mind. With each stroke of the brush, Hannah unleashed her emotions, blending the anxiety of the morning into vibrant possibilities on the canvas. It was exhilarating and frightening simultaneously. She lost herself in the rhythm of creativity. The surrounding chatter transformed into a background score that distinctly positioned her in her reality, not as a hesitant observer, but as a determined participant. As she continued, a sense of clarity emerged. She realized that this artistic journey wasn't merely about creating beautiful pieces. It was about understanding herself, projecting her identity through her work. With each layer she added, she peeled away the expectations of others and revealed her authentic self. Hours later, she stepped back to assess her work. It was raw and still forming, an imperfect reflection of her journey. But it was undeniably hers. A satisfied smile crept onto her face. In that moment, she confronted her fear of inadequacy. She wasn't just an aspiring artist, she was an artist. Feeling invigorated, Hannah found herself immersed in thoughts of how to share this creation with Tom. His unwavering belief in her abilities had forged her path forward. The very act of painting had become a catalyst for newfound resolve, igniting a determination to present her true self to the world. Yet, the joy of her artistic revelation was tinged with apprehension. What would Tom think of her work? Would he recognize this unveiling of her deeper self? And as for her mother, would she truly embrace the evolving identity her art represented? With lingering questions echoing in her mind, Hannah left the studio, the weight of her ambitions settling comfortably on her shoulders. The night air felt crisp and alive, stirring within her the courage to confront not just the canvas but every expectant face in her life. But just as she stepped toward the door of her apartment, her phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Tom that read, "We need to talk." The sudden urgency of those words sent a shiver down her spine. What did it mean? What could possibly be so serious that he wanted to talk now? A fresh wave of anxiety crashed over her, swirling the newfound confidence she'd just mustered. She took a deep breath. The next conversation would either cement her progress or shake her foundation yet again. Would she be ready for whatever Tom needed to say? The air thickened with anticipation as Hannah stared at her phone, the words swimming before her eyes. Tom's message was a simple proposition, yet it carried the weight of uncertainty. Would he validate her newfound boldness, or would he doubt her newly discovered identity? She paced the small apartment, anxiety coiling tighter around her stomach. The space felt inadequate, the walls pressing in like the limitations she had fought so hard to escape. The vibrant splashes of color on her canvas beckoned her back, but instead, her mind looped through questions she couldn't articulate. She had painted a piece of her soul, but would Tom see it? Would it matter? "Focus," she murmured aloud, realizing she was on the verge of spiraling. She settled into the spare chair, inhaling deeply and centering her thoughts. The decisions that lay ahead were hers alone. This was not just about Tom's appraisal of her art. It was about preparing to stand firm in her truth. She could shape her own narrative, regardless of how others perceived it. With intention, she reached for her sketchbook, flipping through the pages filled with sketches of her journey. Each image told a story, of frustration, resilience, and now, of transformation. They should serve as reminders, She was standing on the precipice of change, and she wouldn't allow fear to pull her back into the shadows. What lay ahead could be an opportunity for growth. Perhaps it wasn't just about Tom understanding her art, but whether she could communicate her conflict and evolution effectively. She didn't need to assimilate into someone else's expectations. She needed to show him who she had become. Minutes melted into an hour as she trapped herself in thought, recalling her early days in art school, where the fear of failure had loomed like a spectre. In contrast, she now found power in those uncertainties, recognizing that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a strength she had sharpened like a tool. Finally, the stillness of her inner monologue was interrupted by the definitive buzz of her phone, signaling Tom's anticipated arrival. Her heart raced as she prepared for his entry into her space, both physically and emotionally. When he knocked, Hannah drew a steadied breath and opened the door. Tom stood in the hallway, his face displaying a mixture of concern and anticipation. There was a subtle shift in the air, a sense that this meeting could redefine their relationship. She motioned for him to come inside, her heart echoing the words she wanted to articulate, unsure of how to begin. "Hey," he said, his voice warm yet tentative. "I got your message. You seemed excited about something." Her mouth felt dry. Did he sense the weight of the unspoken tension? She gestured to her canvas, the colors radiant against the wall, a stark contrast to her lingering worries. "I painted something today," she said, trying to infuse her voice with the confidence she had felt mere hours ago. "It's different." Tom's gaze drifted to the painting, and as he stepped closer, the creases on his forehead deepened in concentration. She stood beside him, bracing for his reaction. Would he praise her effort, or would an expression of confusion cloud his features? "What do you think?" she asked, the words trembling with the vulnerability of the moment. It felt monumental, like standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering between fear and the call of the unknown. Tom's eyes softened and he turned to her. "It's powerful, Hannah, but—" His voice trailed off, a hint of hesitation in his tone. A chilling shiver raced down Hannah's spine. The anticipation transformed into dread as she braced for the weight of his next words. Had the moment she had longed for just become an unsettling challenge? Behind the artistry she had bared on canvas, would he unearth her underlying insecurities instead? It was time for Hannah to confront this pivotal juncture and its implications, about art, authenticity, and perhaps even love. Yet as Tom opened his mouth to speak, she could only wonder if the journey they had embarked upon together was about to clash against the tides of reality. What awaited them on this unpredictable path? Could he accept all that she had uncovered about herself? Or would it shatter their connection altogether? Hannah held her breath, teetering on the precipice of an emotional cliff. The vulnerability she had laid bare on the canvas was now echoed in the stillness of the room. She watched as Tom collected his thoughts, his expression shifting through confusion and contemplation. What would he uncover about her struggle? "It's powerful, Hannah, but I feel something deeper here, and I'm not sure if it's expressed the way you want it to be," he finally stated, his voice a blend of hesitation and honest concern. His words stung, like a cold splash of water, but instead of retreating into self-doubt, a fierce determination ignited within her. Tom had been her confidant, her anchor in past storms, but art demanded authenticity. Now she needed to rise to the occasion and articulate her vision. "What do you mean?" she pressed, her voice steady despite the tension lacing her insides. Rather than folding under pressure, she felt an unexpected urge to confront this concept of how her art was perceived. "It's visceral, almost chaotic," Tom replied, gesturing to the tempest of colors. "But I wonder if you're ready to embrace that chaos fully. There's a struggle that isn't clear enough." Hannah had been grappling with chaos long before this conversation. It danced within her, from the decision to leave the safety of previous boundaries to the forming of her identity on the canvas. Yet, could she show that raw reality? Did she dare to expose herself fully? "I can redefine my chaos," she declared, an unexpected voice of authority shaping her words. "What I painted isn't merely a reflection, it's an evolution, a transformation. My brush defined moments where old boundaries crumbled, and I emerged. It's new, it's raw. But I guess I'm still learning how to communicate that." Tom blinked, absorbing her revelation while a soft smile crept across his features. Encouraged by his reaction, Hannah took the next step down the path of brave confrontation. "I want you to see all of me, not just the acceptable version. I want you to understand that this chaos, this complexity, is part of my truth." His brow furrowed as if wrestling with an internal conflict. "Hannah, that's not what I meant. It's not bad, it just needs more clarity. It's lovely, just overwhelming, like an unfinished thought." An inward tremor writhed within her. His kind explanation didn't subtract from her sense of urgency. It was a challenge. Could she embrace this feedback without losing her authenticity? She had to navigate this precarious balance, using it as fuel to push forward rather than retreating. She looked back at the canvas, then turned to face Tom. "Tell me what I should clarify. Help me shape it. If this painting is going to resonate, it has to reflect truth. But right now, I'm lost in my process." The intensity of their eye contact sent a wave of understanding crashing between them. Tom seemed to sense the weight of her declaration, and as he stepped back to consider her, she felt a flicker of hope. "Let's dive deeper," he said slowly. "Let's take this one brushstroke at a time." As they began to discuss revisions, Hannah realized that each comment and suggestion was like turning the page of a new chapter. She planned to articulate what had previously felt unspeakable. It was an opportunity to discover not just her artistic potential, but the power of collaboration in furthering her own narrative. Later, as the shadows lengthened in the room with the closing day, she grabbed her sketchbook again, invigorated with a sense of purpose. This was not just about clarifying her painting, but about the exploration of her voice as an artist. Hours later, inspired yet exhausted, she leaned back and considered what had come from the evening. Tom had shown her that vulnerability was sustainable only alongside clarity and intent. But she also needed to confront another unsettling truth. Her evolution was not complete. What lay beneath the surface of her art was perhaps a deeper personal battle yet to be articulated. Could she confront the fears and traumas that twisted beneath the surface, lurking like shadows waiting to be illuminated? Steeling herself for further revelations, she realized the journey was just beginning, and the canvas was a map of what she had yet to discover. As fatigue began to settle in, an urgent question echoed in her mind. What would it take to embrace every facet of her identity without fear? The evening air was heavy with unanswered queries as she closed her sketchbook, determined to reveal not just her art, but the story intricately intertwined within her soul. As her phone buzzed again, Hannah braced herself for another message, an invitation to dive even deeper into her revelations, or perhaps a challenge she wasn't yet prepared to face. What awaited her now? The late evening hours crept by, the world outside her studio obscured by the heavy drapes. Hannah glanced at her phone, feeling the anticipation coil tightly in her chest. Deciding to embrace the turmoil rather than shy away from it, she unlocked her device. The screen lit up with a message from an art collective she had submitted 2 weeks earlier. "We would love to discuss your submission. Can you meet us tomorrow at noon?" The invitation sent ripples of excitement mixed with dread through her veins. This was not just another opportunity. It felt monumental, a chance to expose her chaotic essence on a broader platform. If she truly wanted to communicate her struggle, she would need to dig deeper into her own psyche. Taking a deep breath, she returned her focus to the canvas before her, recognizing that she stood at a crossroads. If she wanted to soar, it was time to not only share her art, but also articulate what had anchored her emotions to the physical medium. Tom's feedback echoed in her mind. There was a clarity waiting to be unleashed amid the overwhelming chaos. She picked up her paintbrush and dipped it into a mix of vibrant reds and deep blues, the colors swirling like a storm within her. Every stroke was an exploration, a connection to the fears she had long buried, a reminder of the turbulent past and the uncertainty of her future. With each movement, she allowed pieces of her soul to flood the canvas, hesitating only momentarily before committing her thoughts to this physical form. As the sun began to rise, throwing soft glimmers across her workspace, Hannah had come to terms with a hard truth. Each layer of paint uncovered another layer of herself. She painted until her fingers ached, her thoughts weaving in and out of focus. Memories of moments that once felt too painful to revisit returned, and her brush became her ally, translating whispers of sorrow into strokes of strength. Then, she felt something shift within her, a latent power, like the coalescing of storm clouds before a thunderous downpour. It was more than just chaos, it was the recognition of resilience. She painted furiously, capturing the rawness of her struggles, channeling the frustration of being misperceived, longing for understanding. Just as she stepped back to admire her work, another text interrupted her reverie. It was from Tom, asking to see her latest creations before the meeting. She considered the implications. Would showing him this new version of her chaos lead to further clarity, or would it cast her vulnerability into unsettling light once again? The decision loomed over her, a precipice from which she needed to leap. She wrestled with the thought of disclosing this deeper layer of herself. Was she ready to be seen, not just as an artist, but as an individual carrying a tumultuous narrative? She knew she could either reinforce her emerging identity, or let fear dictate her next move. Hannah's heart raced. She felt an overwhelming need for validation, yet the potential for critique loomed large. What if Tom failed to recognize this newly uncovered truth? What if he saw only the chaos again and missed the strength woven within? Staring back at the canvas, she suddenly recognized that this was not merely about her interaction with Tom. It was about her journey towards self-acceptance and mastery over her own narrative. It was about whether she would choose to stand in her truth even when it felt precarious. With shaking hands, she selected a photo to send to Tom, her pulse quickening as she clicked send. As seconds ticked by, she felt exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated. What would his response reveal not just about her art, but about her own growth? And most importantly, how would this challenge push her closer to embracing every facet of her identity without fear? Then came the undeniable reality. She couldn't postpone her reckoning much longer. Tomorrow she would enter a new arena, armed with the clarity she had fought so hard to forge. But would she possess the courage to stand steadfast in her vulnerability against the tides of uncertainty that waited for her? With the clock ticking towards her meeting, the only question in her mind was visceral and pressing. Could she truly illuminate her deepest fears and emerge unscathed? As she cast her eyes back towards the canvas, a sudden thrill coursed through her. Was there an answer ready to reveal itself just beyond that surface? Hannah stood before the sprawling canvas, a whirlwind of colors and emotions blending into a narrative uniquely her own. As the light streamed through her studio windows, illuminating her latest work, she felt a surge of exhilaration. The chaos she had once feared now resembled her truth rather than an endless struggle. The tranquility of that moment was short-lived as her phone buzzed beside her, a reminder of the impending meeting with the art collective. The opportunity had arrived for her to express not just her artwork, but the essence of who she was becoming. Taking a deep breath, she embraced a sense of nervous anticipation. This was her moment. As she walked into the gallery the next day, the polished floors and bright lights felt foreign yet electrifying. Conversations buzzed around her, artists and professionals passionately discussing their interpretations and visions. Hannah's earlier apprehension clung to her momentarily, whispering doubts that perhaps she did not belong amidst such talent. But with each pulse of her heart, she remembered the vibrant strokes of her canvas and the revelations they held. The moment she entered the small meeting room within the gallery, her confidence grew. A group of individuals awaited her, their faces animated yet welcoming. Among them, a familiar face appeared. It was Tom, standing at the corner with an encouraging smile. He had already taken a step into this world, reminding her of every ounce of support he'd given her along the way. Hannah introduced herself, her voice steadier than she had anticipated. The topic shifted rapidly to her work, and as she explained the meaning behind each brushstroke, she felt layers of vulnerability strip away the hesitation she'd once had about sharing. Describing how her art represented the chaos of emotions she had carried and turned into a source of strength resonated with the audience. Each word transformed her insecurities into a source of storytelling, sparking curiosity. One of the reviewers raised an eyebrow, intrigued. This piece radiates deep emotional struggle. How far are you willing to go with this exploration? Would you consider displaying it publicly, allowing viewers to witness this journey? The question hung heavily in the air, swaying between fear and exhilaration. Seizing the opportunity, Hannah voiced her intentions. Absolutely. Allowing others to engage with my truth feels both terrifying and liberating. I won't hide who I am. I want to showcase not just my art, but the journey of overcoming, the path from struggle to authenticity. Tom met her gaze, pride gleaming in his eyes, encouraging her to continue. The discussions they held afterward expanded beyond her art. They delved into the expansive concept of vulnerability in creation, how it could evoke connection rather than judgment. Each dialogue fueled Hannah's conviction, reinforcing that her narrative not only mattered but resonated. Days turned into weeks, and Hannah's newfound confidence blossomed. Her artwork began to attract attention. Invitations to showcase her pieces became frequent occurrences. What once felt like a distant dream morphed into a reality as she prepared for her first solo exhibition, aptly titled, Emerging from Shadows. As the day arrived, Hannah stood in the bustling gallery surrounded by onlookers, each reflecting a piece of her journey back to her. The chaos of the brushstrokes, the vivid colors, and the narratives represented a treasure trove of discovery that would forever echo through her. At that moment, she could sense her heart swelling with pride. She looked around to find Tom smiling at her from a distance, admiration etched on his face, validating everything she had conquered. But it wasn't just about his recognition. It felt profoundly fulfilling to finally acknowledge her evolution in front of those who had once made her doubt her worth. Hannah spotted her mother among the crowd. Margaret's warmth and pride radiated as their eyes met, a silent understanding sealing the bond between them. There was no need for words. Hannah had painted a new legacy that harmonized both their identities. The exhibition was a resounding success, with viewers moved by the depth of her art and stories radiating from the canvas. Each conversation sparked excitement, curiosity, and recognition. As the night progressed, Hannah felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She had transcended the shadows of doubt, finally establishing her own voice amid the legacy she so desperately wished to honor. In that defining moment, Hannah realized her fears had transformed into stepping stones. She had conquered not only her artistic aspiration, but also the intricate labyrinth of self-acceptance. Every stroke of the brush had been a healing process, leading her to a fulfilling path she had once considered out of reach. With newfound confidence, she awaited her future achievements. In this space, she not only showcased her art, but the layers of growth and transformation she had carved through hardship. It was a triumphant chapter, reflecting not just an artist's journey, but a woman emerging from the shadows of expectation and regret, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Now, the most significant moment had arrived. Each visitor looking at her work became a thread woven into her new identity. And as Hannah looked at her canvas, illuminated by the warmth of the gallery lights, she felt a deep sense of belonging. She had achieved what once felt so foreign. She had painted her truth and emerged into the light. And now, dear viewers, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire your journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for artists turning their struggles into triumphs. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Hannah's growth and the significance of her art. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion of personal transformation. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration.